Part 2, Chapter H. The last thing you'd want after being freed from slavery is being enslaved again. But as it turns out, that might be exactly what you get. That is, if you are an African American living in the late 19th century. This was the situation of the character H. In this chapter, we are introduced to him by him being arrested based off of the accusation of him looking at a white woman, the daughter of a sharecropper he works for. They tell him he owes a $10 fine for looking at a white woman, but he cannot pay this because he has only saved up $5 from working. He has no family to turn to because he left them when he was freed, and this forces him to go to prison. But before he can go to prison, the prison sells him to a coal mine for $19 a month. He is priced above the other convicts because of how big and strong he is. They feel that he will last longer in the mines and not die so quickly as many of the convicts do. Working in coal mines at this time was very dangerous due to collapses and black lung and other issues such as not completing your quota for the day and being whipped to death as example. In the coal mines, H gets paired up with a man named Thomas. Thomas is a white convict, so he is an outlier. He does not fit in with the majority of the African Americans who are enslaved in this coal mine. He feels that this is unfair and is prejudiced towards them and does not want to work with them. Although H shows mercy, and when Thomas can't complete the amount of coal he needs to shovel for the day, H shovels it for him. This act of kindness touches Thomas and helps to start to change his views. After this intensive double shoveling by H, the next day he is not able to lift the shovel, and he is scared that he is going to die. Everyone sees this and pitches in because of how he helped Thomas when he didn't need to and saves H. One of the men that helps name is Gyasi. He is a convict who has dreams of getting out and becoming a cutter as a real job because of how good he is at it. Him and H get along very well. Gyasi is a small man and makes it easy for him to get into the small places to cut the hole for the dynamite. Fast forward some time. Gyasi gets out eventually, and soon after H follows. H gets out a year early because of his hard work and good behavior and the amount of money he made for the company. He works his way and finds himself to Joey and meets his family there. This is when he starts to feel envious that he does not have a family of his own and misses his past love, Ed, who he cheated on and lost before being enslaved. Gyasi gets him a job at the same coal mine that he is working at. This leads H to start building his own home in the little free time he has from working at the mine. Eventually, the union talks H into joining because they do not like the conditions that are happening at the mine for the workers. They feel it is unsafe for them and decide to go on strike. H goes along with them, and the workers go on strike from the coal mine. The coal mine does not like this and just brings in more convicts in order to replace them until the strike ends. The sides both agree on not killing anyone, although one day during the strikes a young boy runs and tries to run away. He gets shot on the spot, and this releases an all-out riot on both sides. After this, the strikers help clean up, and there is still striking to be done, and 6 months of striking leads them a 50-cent pay raise. This is not exactly what the strikers wanted, but they take it for now and go back to work. H has Josie's little boy write a letter to his past lover because he misses her and wants to make things up. One day after he comes home from work, he finds that someone is cooking in the kitchen. It is her. They talk about the problems and make up. And that is where the chapter ends. The first source that I found that connects to this is a primary document, and it is the Mississippi Black Codes of 1866. Many states had their own black codes during this time. Ohio was the first, and I chose Mississippi for various reasons. It's closer to the time period. And what these black codes were essentially was a way to control and a way to limit the freedom that these blacks had just gotten from being free. So even though that, the Civil War has ended, all these African Americans are now free, many of the states did not like this and didn't want them to be free. So they came up with these laws of their own to counteract their freedom, and it was really sleazy and horrible. And yeah, so one of the ones I wanted to note, this whole thing is the Mississippi black laws, but they have the penal laws of Mississippi, and specifically section 2 states any freed man, free negro, or mulatto committing riots, ruts, affrays, trespasses, malicious mischief, cruel treatment of animals, sedative speeches, insulting gestures, language, or acts or assaults of any person, disturbance of the peace, exercising the function of a minister in the gospel without license. So it just basically just throws anything and everything in there to give them an excuse in order to arrest them or find any way to limit their freedom. Another one, the first one, takes away their right to bear arms, and even just carrying a knife can punish them by a fine. And a lot of them revolve around working. They can go to prison if they quit their job without fulfilling the contract, and all this horrible stuff. And these are basically what leads to H being arrested, and that's why I wanted to look further into them. In his case, he was just accused of looking at a white woman, and that was enough to land him a $10 fine, and when he couldn't pay that, he had to go to prison. The second source that I looked at was a book called Diamonds in the Rough, A History of the Alabama Cahaba Coal Field by James Sanders Day, and it talks a lot about coal of the early 19th century, discovering and marketing the coal, and mining a map, which isn't relevant at all. But specifically what is relevant is the convict leasing in chapter 5, and that's what I was looking at. And he goes over a lot of numbers of different places and how popular this practice was of just throwing a bunch of black people in prison and then just leasing them out to these coal mines in order to basically just have slaves again, and just be like, we don't want these people to be free anymore. Legally they are free, so we have to take away all their freedoms to make it that if you break any rules you aren't free anymore, and then we can sell you again to justify our need for slavery. And for example, in Jefferson County, he talks about how 30% of the people serving sentences there were for no more than 20 days for misdemeanors such as gambling or illegal drinking, stuff like that. Just random stuff to just throw as many people they could and get these workers for and then when they can't pay the fine, you throw them in jail and sell them. He also talks about how dangerous the works of the mine in here are, and just how little disregard they had for human life of these convicts. So in the Pratt Consolidated, there was an explosion that happened that killed 128 people. 122 of those people were convicts, and so only 6 of them were free, and all but 5 of them were African American. So that just shows you how little diversity it was in these convict leasing. It was primarily people of African American descent, and it was primarily convicts who were working in these coal mines. And that is because no one wanted to do these jobs because of how horrible it is, like the conditions and how unsafe and how often people died and didn't make it out of these. Which their solution to that, because coal was in such high demand, was just, all right, take all these free people who we don't want to be free anyways, make them break laws that we make that shouldn't be laws so that we can enslave them again. And then just, if they die, they die. No one cared about them anyways, which obviously people did care about them, but in their eyes they didn't, And so I just thought it was a really interesting source, and I kind of want to read the whole book, but I just kind of read through that chapter 5 about convict leasing between 1872 and 1927. And it's really interesting, and he gives a lot more statistics about different places and the proportion of convicts and how much money they made and how much was spent on, because the way it works is the companies would pay the state X amount of money per person to come, and instead of spending their time in prison, their sentence in prison would be like, hey, I'll pay you, in H's case, $19 a month. If instead of for his 10-year just sitting doing nothing in prison, he comes and works for me. And so the state makes more money that way, and the companies get slave labor again, essentially, because they were constantly throwing people in prison so that they could sell them. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. But that was another source. Any questions for me?